What's up, guys? Commissioner Danielevich here. And before I begin today's very special post draft podcast, I just want to say thank you to everybody for a great draft. I think things went by really smoothly. I think everybody did really well, and I also want to give a special thanks to Ryan, co-commissioner, for setting up an awesome draft room and really making it the most fun it could have been. So, just a quick note before I start. If you see me looking up a lot, it's because there is I have a picture of the draft board up behind me on the TV screen, so I'm going to be looking at that, referencing that for notes and stuff like that. So let's see. This episode is going to be all about the draft that took place yesterday, and I just want to go through and talk about some things that I found interesting, picks that I thought were really good, picks that I thought were really not so good, and some of the more interesting things that I took note of this draft. So Ryan is doing draft grades, and he's going to be posting them to the Twitter account. Make sure you guys are all following. So I'm not really going to be grading people as a whole, more so just specific picks, stuff that jumps out to me while I'm looking at this board right now. And the first thing that I want to talk about is Dennis's selection of Royce Freeman in the 5th round. So Royce Freeman was taken as the 19th running back in our draft, which may not sound very high. But looking at this draft board, you see guys like Jay Ajayi taken later in the 5th round, Derrick Henry taken in the 5th round as well, Mark Ingram and Marshawn Lynch taken in the 6th round, Isaiah Crowell taken in the 7th round. These guys are proven players, guys that are gonna put up numbers for you. And picking Royce Freeman ahead of those guys just was a little bit questionable to me. Not that I think he's going to be bad. Obviously, he's played really well in the preseason, but I don't really merit too much on preseason. He is running behind the 19th ranked offensive line, according to Pro Football Focus. And with Paxton Lynch at quarterback and not too much talent in the receiving game now that Demaryius Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders are getting up there in age, I think Freeman could find himself in a little bit of a tough situation in his rookie year, but we'll see how that one goes. The next pick that really surprised me was also in the 5th round, and it was Connor choosing Evan Ingram. Evan Ingram was just the 4th tight end to go off the board in our league. A guy that's been injured, and a guy that shined, not really even shined, but it produced in a Giants offense that was riddled with injuries last year. So now with Odell Beckham coming back, Sterling Shepard playing a full season healthy, I really don't see how that, and Saquon Barkley added to the offense, I really don't see how Ingram really stands to perform any better in that offense than he did a season before. And especially when you look at guys taken after him, Greg Olsen and Jimmy Graham and Kyle Rudolph, guys that are scorers, guys that put up points. Obviously, Jimmy Graham has struggled. He struggled a lot since leaving Drew Brees in New Orleans, but it can never hurt to have Aaron Rodgers throwing you the ball, and taking Evan Ingram before guys like that really kind of took me by surprise. Because if you wanted Evan Ingram, I think he could be a good player. I think he'll put up points this year, but I really think you could have waited. I mean, I took Kyle Rudolph in the ninth round, and yeah, I really think Evan Ingram would still have been there in the 9th round after that, even if you could have taken him anywhere later than that. But I think 5 was way too high for Evan Ingram. One team I really want to talk about, because I think had the most interesting draft in a lot of ways, was my dad. First of all, I think Antonio Brown, 8th overall, is the pick of the draft. I did pass on him at 3rd, but I think the fact that Aaron Rodgers, Zeke Elliott, and Leonard Fournette went in the 3 picks before Antonio Brown is just mind blowing. And so for him to be there at 8 is just I think a shock to him. I think he really couldn't believe that he was there, and I think that is the best pick in this draft. But after that, he made some really confusing ones to me. Um, First off, Dion Lewis in the 4th round. Now, yes, Dion Lewis produced a lot last year. He was a RB1 with the Patriots, but now going to Tennessee and splitting carries with a guy they like very, very much in Derrick Henry, a guy that pretty much forced DeMarco Murray to retire because Tennessee would rather go with him. So I know Dion Lewis is more beneficial in the PPR setup just because of his proficiency out of the backfield catching passes. But Derrick Henry being the big back he is, being younger, stronger, he stands to gain from the short yardage, the goal line run-ins, the punch-ins, and I think he's just the featured back in that offense anyway. So taking Dion Lewis a whole round before Derrick Henry was pretty surprising. I don't know if my dad thought that Dion Lewis still played for the Patriots, but yeah, 4th round, that one just really surprises me. Next thing I want to talk about, because there was a little bit of controversy about this last night, was Little Dennis's team. So after the draft, there was Dennis was doing a lot of talking, saying that his team was the best, and when power rankings comes out, he better be first or second, and all this, and if he only had Adam Thielen, he'd have by far the best team. And then Ryan posted a draft grade onto the Twitter account, and I didn't get to read the whole thing. It was taken down shortly after, but Dennis was not happy at all with the lower draft grade. But looking at his team now, I don't really see why. Yeah, Le'Veon Bell is a stud. Best player. He's going to be a top 5 player no matter what, really, barring injury or suspension. But you're way too high on AJ Green, I think. AJ Green's a guy that hasn't put up wide receiver 1 numbers in a while, really. I mean, maybe I take that back. Yeah, he's one of the upper receivers, but he's not on the same plane as Antonio Brown, DeAndre Hopkins, Michael Thomas, Julio Jones, Odell Beckham Jr. And I'm not saying he's bad to have as your wide receiver 1. He's a good player. But to act like him having Le'Veon Bell and A.J. Green is the same as having Le'Veon Bell and Julio Jones is crazy. And to be honest, your running backs are a mess. Your running backs are pretty horrible looking from the start of it. Like I said, Le'Veon Bell, undoubtedly a star, superstar. Royce Freeman, big old question mark. He could be really good. It could pay off big for you. Or he could just become a guy that plays on an offense that struggles to score 14 points a game, and so as a product of that, he struggles. Chris Thompson is going to have to play a lot for you. I mean, he's the third running back you selected, and you only have one more. So Chris Thompson's hurt right now. He's battling a leg injury. He might not play week 1. He just signed Adrian Peterson, who's looking great in the preseason. I don't care too much for preseason. As I said before, I'll say it again. But the fact that he's running like he's not 33 years old is definitely helpful for him. And Cameron Meredith, you keep talking about this Cameron Meredith pick and how great of a pick this was, because he is Drew Brees' second option, and Drew Brees' second options always do so great. which I don't really know where you're pulling that from. He was okay. But even if Drew Brees' second options were the best in the world, he's not Drew Brees' second option. You're forgetting that Ted Ginn caught 53 passes for Drew Brees last year. 53 passes is a lot, uh, and that is second receiver production. That is not third or slot really. And you don't are you taking into account the fact Cameron Meredith missed all of last season with an injury. He's joining a new team, which means not only does he have to come back from injury, be better than ever, he's got to learn a completely new playbook, which means he probably won't even be at his own best until I'd say week 6 and on from that point. So yeah, I mean maybe he'll produce for you, and maybe he will. I'm not saying he won't, but to say that he is the steal of the draft and he's gonna put up crazy numbers, I think that's a little bit early. Next, I want to kind of look at my team a little bit because it's not fair to talk about other people's teams without talking about my own. My receivers, I'm really not too crazy about them. Stefon Diggs, love him. Allen Robinson coming off an injury, though, learning a new playbook the same way Cameron Meredith is. I think that'll take him time. I think he may struggle early, especially with Mitchell Trubisky at quarterback, who sucks. But Brandon Cooks, I wasn't happy about my Brandon Cooks pick yesterday, but thinking about it more, it's hard when you play for the Patriots. It's really hard. Tom Brady's got so many targets. He spreads the ball around so much that unless your name is Rob Gronkowski, you really don't know if you're going to get the ball too much in a game. But going to the Rams, a team that is going to be putting up ridiculous amounts of points this year between Jared Goff, Brandon Cooks, Robert Woods, and Todd Gurley. I think now looking at it again, I'm happy with that pick. And then Julian Edelman, being able to get him in the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8th round. He's on 4-game suspension, obviously, but he's led before last. Obviously, he missed all of last season with an injury, so the 4 weeks I think aren't really going to matter too much because that'll just be more time for him to rehab, get back to his old self, and also, what was I going to say? Also, he's before last season. Obviously, he didn't play, but before that, he had led the league in receptions 3 of the 4 seasons before that. PPR, obviously, receptions can't be overlooked. One of my favorite picks in this draft, or maybe not favorites, but one I like a lot is Carlos Hyde in the 7th round. A ton of talent. He showed that with San Francisco at his best, but I think he suffered from the carousel they had at quarterback and the lack of direction that they had as a team. But going to Cleveland, where he will be the featured running back, I think an offense that will play fast pace. I think a lot of short yardage throws, no matter whether it's Tyrod Taylor or Baker Mayfield behind or under center. I think their offense will be a lot of quick hitters, hurry up, runs, mixing it up, play action. I think Carlos Hyde will be involved a lot there. And yes, I know that they still have Duke Johnson and Nick Chubb behind him, but Carlos Hyde is the best right now that they have out of those guys. And unless Chubb emerges as something better than that, I think Carlos Hyde will I think Uncle Mark and Gavin will get a lot of production out of Carlos Hyde from the 7th round, especially as their third running back that they drafted. I think that's a great pick, and congratulations to them for making that one. A lot of hype for Uncle Dennis's team after the draft. A lot of hype, and I see why. I like it a lot. Saquon Barkley, obviously, insanely talented, but it's hard. It's hard when you've got that offensive line to really do anything. That offensive line is as good as wet tissue, really. So I think he'll definitely be better used in the passing game. I think this season, uh, the running, unless they show crazy improvement. I mean, just on his talent alone, Saquon Barkley will put up yards in the rushing game. But unless that offensive line improves a lot, I don't expect a Zeke Elliott type rookie year running or rushing wise for Saquon Barkley. I think it's hard behind that offensive line. But yeah, in the passing game, he'll definitely be a big help for that team, and I think he'll catch a lot of passes out of the backfield. Julio Jones, love the guy. All he does is put up big numbers. Great pick in the second round. Um, the other receivers, though, I'm a little bit iffy about. Doug Baldwin will catch a lot of passes. Um, he'll put up numbers, but Juju Smith-Schuster is a guy that kind of screams sophomore slump for me. I think he burst on at the end of last season. Um, People got really hype about it because of the his just the way he conducted himself, his personality, the flash with which he did it. I think that really kind of boosted him above where he actually is. Um, but Jimmy Graham at tight end, really good pick. Someone I was really wanted to get. Jimmy Graham at tight end. Aaron Rodgers historically has not loved tight ends. Martellus Bennett played there last year, and he ended up quitting kind of halfway through the season because he didn't get thrown to enough. Before that, guys like Richard Rodgers. I don't even know who else they've had because he really hasn't done much with them. But a change of scenery has to be good for Jimmy Graham after he was so poorly used in that Seahawks offense. And I think although the history with tight ends that Aaron Rodgers has, I do think he will be targeting Jimmy Graham a lot and using that athleticism, that explosiveness, and making the most of that, adding another weapon to his arsenal. Also, one of the best picks, in my opinion, in the draft was Uncle Dennis choosing Allen Hurns with the final pick. Allen Hurns is going to be a number one receiver for Dallas. They don't have anyone else for Dak Prescott really to throw the ball to. I mean, there's a couple no names that they have, but Hurns is the only one that's put up numbers in the past. And I don't think he's going to put up great numbers because I don't think Dak Prescott is that good. I don't think that the Cowboys' passing game will be that good. But the number one receiver on a team is the number one receiver. So he's going to catch passes. And getting in with the last pick was a great, great choice. Because if he does nothing and he whatever, obviously it doesn't hurt you. He's your last pick. You never have to play him. But he's got the potential as, like I said, as that number one guy in that system to put up numbers that you'd more likely see from a guy taken in the 7th or 8th round as opposed to the 15th. So, great pick there. Also, one of the best picks, in my opinion, in the draft was Uncle Dennis choosing Allen Hurns with the final pick. Allen Hurns is going to be a number one receiver for Dallas. They don't have anyone else for Dak Prescott really to throw the ball to. I mean, there's a couple no names that they have, but Hurns is the only one that's put up numbers in the past. And I don't think he's going to put up great numbers because I don't think Dak Prescott is that good. I don't think that the Cowboys' passing game will be that good. But the number one receiver on a team is the number one receiver. So he's going to catch passes. And getting in with the last pick was a great, great choice. Because if he does nothing and he whatever, obviously it doesn't hurt you. He's your last pick. You never have to play him. But he's got the potential, as like I said, as that number one guy in that system to put up numbers that you'd more likely see from a guy taken in the 7th or 8th round as opposed to the 15th. So, great pick there. Okay, so there's two teams I kind of want to talk about right now because looking at them, it is amazing, like how good of a receiving cores they have, and those are Kyle and my dad. Kyle, obviously, with DeAndre Hopkins and Odell Beckham Jr. is ridiculous to have those two paired up, barring or if they can stay healthy. But then not only that, with Demarius Thomas, Alshon Jeffrey, and Michael Crabtree adding to that group, those are three guys that you can really do a lot with them. And as that in that core as a whole, adding Mohamed Sanu to that in the 11th round, there's a ton that he can do with his wide receiving core, mixing and matching based on matchups, bye weeks. I don't think there's ever going to be a week really where Kyle struggles in the wide receiver department, and that's huge in our league. PPR is everything, and having so many reliable guys like that you know are going to catch passes, that you know are going to get yards, and you know are going to score touchdowns, that can't be underrated at all, or understated at all as to how important that is in our league. And next to my dad's team, I know I touched on his team a little bit already, but he's the same way with his receiving core, honestly. I mean, Antonio Brown, that he speaks for himself. There's not much you need to say there. Amari Cooper. I know Amari Cooper kind of busted a little bit last season. He was taken high, maybe not too high in our league, but he was taken high in a lot of leagues. And because of injury and because of Michael Crabtree's play and then Derek Carr's injuries, Cooper really kind of fell beneath the surface. But this year, you take Cooper out of the lineup. You take Crabtree out of the lineup, who was taking all the red zone targets away just from his size, strength. You add Jordy Nelson as a weapon for Derek Carr, and John Gruden has been talking about playing Amari Cooper in the slot, which is actually where he's probably the strongest. And everybody knows that slot receivers catch passes. And when slot receivers get targets, slot receivers catch passes. And when you've got a slot receiver as talented as Amari Cooper is, that makes for a lot of caught passes and a lot of yards, and hopefully for him some touchdowns. But then backing him up, he's got Chris Hogan, Cooper Kupp, Randall Cobb, and Danny Amendola. All of those guys are huge, huge PPR guys. Getting guys in New England's offense, just because, like I mentioned earlier, about Brandon Cooks last season, you don't really know where the targets are going to go, Rob Gronkowski aside. But with Danny Amendola out for the first 4 weeks, there's really not too many places he can throw the ball. So Chris Hogan's going to get a lot of targets, I think, early in the season especially. Cooper Kupp is just throw it near him, he's going to catch it. Another slot guy, it's going to catch a lot of passes. Randall Cobb now moving from the number 3 on the receiving core or the depth chart to number 2 with the departure of Jordy Nelson. Only stands to benefit from that. And Danny Amendola going away from New England, change of scenery, to Miami, which he should be their number 2, depending on how they want to throw it with, or how they want to play with Devontae Parker. But that's 6 receivers who are going to catch a lot of passes and do a lot of damage. So those are. I just want to touch on Ryan's pick of Anthony Miller real fast, because Dennis hated that pick, and he has been shouting about it since it happened, about how bad of a pick that was. So so between the whole Adam Thielen cheating thing, which the league is still reviewing to determine whether or not there will be a punishment for that, and the roasting about Anthony Miller, I think it's a smart move to circle the Ryan versus Dennis matchup this season, because I think it'll be a pretty competitive one, and I think it'll be big bragging rights one that neither guy really wants to lose. All right, so for this next segment, we're going to take a guest caller and we're going to talk some fantasy football. We're going to talk about the draft. We're going to talk about this upcoming season. So our guest today, he's an avid Matthew Berry reader. He reads his Twitter, reads his blogs. He is a former Poppop's Polock Fantasy League champion, and he is the co-commissioner. Please welcome Ryan Smith. Ryan, how you doing?
Good, man. Co-commissioner's here with the real commissioner. Man, ready for a good season of fantasy football. Draft went excellent yesterday.
I think so too.
See what this season's gonna be.
All right, I wanna get your thought. I'm interested to hear what you thought about the draft because I already talked pretty much in depth about what I thought about everything. A lot of players I talked about. So let me hear some of your thoughts.
Yeah, so I just wanted to break down a couple rounds, not all of them. And the first round I wanted to talk about was the first round. Obviously, it's a big part of a round in fantasy football. And the one thing that really jumped out at me was how about the first round pick and Todd Gurley and how he got him in the fourth spot. I know Le'Veon Bell won. You know, he's a very reliable fantasy player. A lot of people have either Gurley won or Le'Veon going first overall. But we have Gurley going down, dropping to the fourth overall pick to Poppop, who's really trying to make a come up in this year's league. So I know I took David Johnson at 2 because I just believe that Todd Gurley cannot sustain his stats from last year, and his touchdown rate is going to go down. And if you want to talk about why he took Alvin Kamara at 3.
Well, I'm glad you asked. I took Kamara because, like you, I believe that David Johnson's season, Todd Gurley's season, it wasn't a fluke, I would say, but they got more weapons. They added Brandon Cooks, and Jared Goff is getting better. They're going to throw the ball a lot more this season, so that takes away carries, takes away some targets from Todd Gurley. So I think he's going to produce. He's going to have a good year, but after Alvin Kamara's rookie season, I mean, the guy was, I think, 21st in touches among running backs, but he finished first in touchdowns. And with Mark Ingram, who's also on my team, suspended for the first 4 weeks, I expect big production from Kamara in the first 4 weeks, and then I expect him to sustain that once Ingram comes back. Nice little 1-2 punch, and to go with Drew Brees as well as my quarterback.
All right. We're not breaking down your team here. We're in the first round. So what we're going to talk about is how I think Todd Gurley, I think defenses are going to adjust. They're going to make Goff beat them in the air. And Todd Gurley, I just don't think is going to sustain his stats from last year. Another thing that jumped out for me in the first round, the obvious outlier is Aaron Rodgers at 5.
Shocking.
This, in my opinion, is probably one of the worst picks in Poppop's Polock's history. And then another pick that I thought stood out was the 10th overall pick in Saquon Barkley. I think I really like that pick for Uncle Denny, even though he's an Eagles fan. I think his average draft position is either 6 or 7 right now. I think the Giants are going to try to get the running game going. He's a great pass catcher. He just has some question marks since he's a rookie in the league and has to adjust to the speed of the game.
One pick in the first round that I touched on a little bit earlier, and I went as far as to call it the best pick of the draft, was my dad taking Antonio Brown at 8. I mean, the fact that the guy is the number 1 pass catcher in football, and he has been for a couple of years now, and for him to slide past guys like Aaron Rodgers, Ezekiel Elliott, and Leonard Fournette in a PPR league, I was pretty shocked by that.
I think he is the number 1 receiver and has been in fantasy the past 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, that kind of production.
8th overall was a pretty good pick.
Yeah, I called it the best pick in the draft, and I think it might have been. I was a little bit confused by Connor taking Ezekiel Elliott before Antonio Brown. That kind of confused me a little bit, especially in a PPR league. Maybe standard, I could see that, but PPR, I think it's hard to choose a guy who's such a small factor in the passing game over Antonio Brown.
Yeah. All right, then second round, I think that Kyle was the big winner overall. I feel like the two-headed monster with Hopkins and Odell, they're both very high volume receivers, and I feel like Kyle, without a doubt, has the best wide receiver duo in the league.
Mm-hmm.
And then another second round pick that I liked was McCaffrey by my dad. I think he's a solid pick. There's a lot of reports out there that they're going to try to get his usage up from 40 much as a game from last year to upper 20s this year, and he's just a PPR machine.
Mm-hmm.
And then overall, the second round, I feel like there was not a single bad pick in the second round. I think it was the most efficient round for our league as a whole, and there's really no big question marks in my opinion.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. I mean, solid players taken at every spot there. There's no guys that you look at and kind of scratch your head. They're all guys that are going to make big differences for all their teams this year.
And then for the third round, just a couple points. Kenyon Drake, I'm not really big on him. I know he was towards the end of the third round, but I'm still not a big fan of him because he's never really been a workhorse back for some reason. I know he has the talent. He can produce, which is frustrating because at Alabama they had the 1-2 punch with Derrick Henry and Kenyon Drake, so he never was a workhorse in college either. He has the talent, but for some reason coaches don't like to use him as a workhorse, which could be unreliable as a fantasy asset. And then I also didn't like Jerick McKinnon, the college pick with Jerick McKinnon. I feel like he's going to be sharing some touches, even though he's a PPR back, but he's going to be sharing some touches with Matt Breida. I know they're both at the end of round 3, but those were the two that stood out to me.
Yeah, I agree with you there. With the Kenyon Drake pick, especially with a name like Adam Thielen still on the board. I think Thielen's really talented. I think even you could make a case that Zach Ertz is more of a fantasy piece, a better fantasy piece than Kenyon Drake. But yeah, that one was a little bit surprising to me, and I wasn't too impressed with it.
See, that's interesting because when I broke down for round 4, I was looking at Ertz and Gordon, and I thought they were both drafted too early. Mm-hmm. So to think that you think Ertz should go a little bit earlier was interesting.
No, I wouldn't say he should have gone earlier. I'm saying he probably is a better player than Kenyon Drake. Is my point. I think, yeah, other than if your name's not Rob Gronkowski or Travis Kelce, I think that is you shouldn't really be drafted as a tight end till like maybe the 5th or 6th round. So yeah, I don't think he really should have slid or should have been taken that high. But I think my point was that Kenyon Drake is a lesser player in my eyes than Zach Ertz.
Yeah, so for the 4th round, I said just two things that stood out to me was that I feel like Ertz and Josh Gordon were picked way too early. Like you said, I think for tight ends, if you don't go Gronkowski or Kelce, your best option is probably just to wait it out until round 7 or 6 to get tight end. And then my other point was the T.Y. Hilton. Are you there?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I thought we lost connection.
No, you're good.
I was like, And then the only thing was T.Y. Hilton and Doug Baldwin are big question marks for me in the 4th round. I feel like they're boom or bust players, and they can either kill your season or they can make you a top team, and that was the last thing I saw.
Yeah, for T.Y. Hilton, especially, I think a lot of his production depends on whether or not Andrew Luck plays and how well Andrew Luck plays. Josh Gordon, what a good job I did. I finessed Connor hard on that one. I've been hyping him up off season. I was gonna take him 1st round, and when truth be told, I probably wouldn't have pulled the trigger till like the 8th or 9th on Josh Gordon. I love the guy, but 4th round is a stretch, especially taking him before his teammate Jarvis Landry. I think that was the biggest surprise that Landry went after Josh Gordon, which I don't think happened in anybody else's league, except maybe in Josh Gordon's league. But I think that was the only time.
I think deep down you're a little hurt that you don't have Josh Gordon.
No, I definitely wanted him, but at 4, there is no way I'm getting him there. So.
All right, so for the middle rounds, I kind of threw a couple points. I think a couple defenses were selected too early. I think defenses are matchup dependent. I know you took one. I know Poppop took the Rams. I just think that 7th round is way too early for a defense, no matter what team you get. And then I think that quarterbacks overall in the middle rounds were taken off the board in the proper order.
Mm-hmm.
I think Rodgers, Brady, Wilson, then Watson are the right way to draft them. Not Rodgers in the first round. I feel like they went off the board in the right order. And then with that being said, I think Breeze in the 11th round could be a big steal in the draft. And I think he's on Breeze on your team in the 11th round. I think that could be a steal of the draft because Breeze is always top 5 in quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Do you have anything to say about the middle rounds?
I talked a lot about the 5th round in particular earlier. First, I started the whole episode off with Royce Freeman, and I think a big question mark there. I think a reach. And maybe the biggest reach of the whole draft, I think, was Evan Engram in the 5th round. That pick did not make any sense to me with Greg Olsen and Jimmy Graham and Kyle Rudolph and even, I'd say, Trey Burton still on the board. Why are you taking Evan Engram there? I mean, he had a season where he was pretty much the number 1 target, and he still didn't put up too many numbers. Now with Beckham, Shepard, and Barkley added around him, I think he might kind of fade away, disappear a little bit in behind those guys. So 5th round, way too early for me, for Evan Engram.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And then for the later rounds, we have the Marquise Lee pick that will probably go down history with the Poppop. We're really bashing Connor's team here.
I know, I feel bad.
Power rankings later on to see where he falls preseason. But Marquise Lee, he was selected after being ruled out for the season. That was an owner mistake.
Yeah, gotta know these
in the draft
things.
position. I wanted to touch on that your team, and that you took some flyers on guys who are suspended for 4 games.
I did.
In Ingram and Julian Edelman.
I did.
And I think that a big part of your season is going to be the first 4 weeks, and if you can get through those first 4 weeks. If you start out 0-4, I feel like you could dig yourself a hole, but I feel like the first 4 weeks for your team is very pivotal.
Well, I think the reason I decided to choose those guys is mostly because I was pretty happy with where I was able to get them and with who I already had, especially getting Mark Ingram, being able to start Alvin Kamara and Devontae Freeman for the first 4 weeks of the season. Those are 2 top-tier running backs. Maybe Freeman might be in that second tier, but still, he's right up there. So I've got 2 proven guys. I'm not really starting. I feel very comfortable starting both those guys. I'm not worried about their production. And then with my receivers, I wasn't too happy with my receivers, but Julian Edelman wouldn't have been a guy I would have started anyway. And I think, when did I get him? I think getting him in the 8th round was pretty solid. I mentioned earlier, before last season, obviously he missed with an injury, but the 3 out of the 4 seasons before that, he led the league in catches, which you can't really understate that in fantasy or in PPR. So I feel good about those 2 guys. And then even if I do need to start 3 running backs in one of the first 4 weeks, I feel pretty solid with both Kerryon Johnson and CJ Anderson as a kind of a stretch running back wide receiver, depending on the matchups.
Okay, and then a late round pick that I want to talk about and get your opinion on was the Dez Bryant pick by Poppop. And my opinion on it is that I think it was actually a good pick. My opinion is that I think he does sign with a team, whether it's the Patriots or Seattle, and he produces in some way. He got bashed a lot for the Dez Bryant pick, but I don't think it was that bad of a pick, and I feel like it could help his team out. Maybe not right away, but down the road.
No, this was one I didn't touch on this at all earlier, but I do to a point agree with you. I mean, when was he taken, in the very last round or
12th round?
Oh, 12th round. That might have been a little early.
He's with Pierre Garçon. Corey Clement went that round.
Yeah.
Tucker, Cameron Meredith.
Well, yeah. See, looking at the players around him, there's not too much production there. I don't see too much production from those guys. So if you lose a 12th round pick, it's really not going to hurt him at all, and it does have the upside if like you said, Des Bryant can just land on a team. He's still kind of a beast. He's still got the size. He's still got the hands, and he's a pretty fierce competitor. So I think if he does get on a team, he finds his way on a team, there's a chance that he produces pretty high above what a 12th rounder or what you expect out of a 12th rounder.
All right, so round up the draft and just stop discussing about this. I want to talk about. I had a worst pick in the draft, which we probably both agree on, is Aaron Rodgers round one. And then my best sleeper picks were Chris Hogan in the 6th round. He's Tom Brady's #1 receiver. He's being overlooked in a lot of drafts, and I think he has a big breakout year, even though he was a top 20 receiver last year in fantasy. And then another Patriot I want to touch on was Rex Burkhead, which was Poppop's pick in the 10th round. I think he's going to score a lot of touchdowns, get a lot of goal line work, and if he can stay healthy, I think he produces well for fantasy this year.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up the Chris Hogan pick because I was actually just talking with my dad about his receivers, and I did praise the Chris Hogan pick. I talked about it earlier in this episode, how I liked it. He, on the other hand, wasn't too happy about it, which I see where he's coming from. I think I said earlier that if your name's not Rob Gronkowski, you really don't know where you stand every week in the Patriots offense. Tom Brady loves to spread the ball around. He loves to give it to different guys. But with Julian Edelman sidelined for 4 weeks, I do think Chris Hogan will put up some really, really nice production out of the 6th round.
All right, so I think that rounds up
that about wraps up the draft talk, yeah?
All right, then I kind of just went into each team and just described what I think their team, their strengths, their weaknesses, X factors, and I broke down each team. So I looked at your dad's team first.
Okay.
And I ranked each team in tiers. So there's 3 tiers. Tier 1 being the top tier, tier 2 being the middle tier, and top 3 being the bottom tier. So for your dad's team, I looked at it, and I think there's a lot of solid receivers. You got Antonio Brown, who's a PPR stud. Chris Hogan, who I think is going to have a breakout year with Tom Brady not having too many weapons, and he's probably the wide receiver 1. And I think that his big question mark and X factor is going to be Amari Cooper. He's had some trouble with drops, but I feel like he can have a big year or he could have a bad year. So his big X factor, I think, is Amari Cooper. With his running backs, I think he has very good PPR backs with Dalvin Cook and Dion Lewis, but they're both not workhorses. Dalvin Cook has been talking about splitting time with Latavius Murray. Latavius Murray, and Lewis is not an every down back. He's a great pass catcher, but he doesn't run significantly well between the tackles. But overall, I think Umbre has a great team, and I have him as a tier 1 team.
The one comment I had, Dion Lewis, to me, I didn't really like him in the 4th round, and to be honest, my dad did not know that he plays for the Titans now.
Oh yeah, that's what I meant.
He did not know he played for the Titans.
My just spent with Derrick Henry, so that's
my point was that Derrick Henry basically forced DeMarco Murray to retire because of how much the Titans liked him. So I don't know what that says for Lewis. Obviously, pass catching, PPR, it's nice. But the Titans seem to be really high on Dion Lewis, and they've got some giants on that offensive line. So I think their offense would be centered more towards, I think it would be more towards a power running, downhill, I formation type pro style.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so then the next team I broke down, I just went down the standings list, and it was Poppop's team. We all know he has a star in Gurley, which was a great pick at 4. He has Michael Thomas, who is a very dependable wide receiver in fantasy. As we saw last year, he was a stud. And the risk that he took, I believe, was LaShawn McCoy with his whole court situation on what's going on with his girlfriend, domestic abuse, or whatever that was. And then I said I think he has a solid tight end in Ertz. I like his Burkhead pick. I have him right now as a tier 3 team, but if it's managed correctly, I think his team can be a tier 2 team.
I think the LaShawn McCoy. That's a good point. I wasn't thinking about that. But I do think he has enough depth at running back to be fine if something were to happen with LaShawn McCoy. I mean, Jay Ajayi, Marshawn Lynch, Rex Burkhead. None of those guys are really superstars or are capable of producing like McCoy does, but they're not too much of a drop off to the point where he will be in serious trouble if LaShawn McCoy does have issues with getting on the field because of off the field stuff.
Gotcha. All right, so we'll move along to the next team. Uncle Mark, keep running through these things. I think that with Fournette and Howard, he has great running backs. But the thing with those two are that they're not much of pass catchers. They're more standard league running backs, but they're still quality running backs, and I don't have a problem with them. He's got Evans and Keenan Allen are solid receivers. But his X factor, I feel like, is going to be Marvin Jones. I think Golden Tate's getting up there in years. The Lions are looking for Marvin Jones to be their probably number 1 receiver. And if he has a big year, I think it could really help his team tremendously. And then he has good quarterback play with Russell Wilson. He took him, I think he was a third quarterback off the board. And I know quarterbacks don't have that much volume in our league, but it's still a solid quarterback. And I think Uncle Mark has a tier 1 team this year.
Tier 1 team. For me, Uncle Mark was more of a tier 2 team. Outside of Leonard Fournette and Russell Wilson, I didn't see too much star power. In my opinion, I've never really been big fans of Keenan Allen and Mike Evans, really.
One more quick thing on Mike Evans. He is missing Jameis Winston with a lot of question marks in the first 4 years. And I think his numbers have gone down when he plays with Ryan Fitzpatrick instead of Jameis Winston.
Yeah, but the thing I did notice about Uncle Mark's team is that I think it's very solid all the way through. I don't see much boom or bust on his team. Marvin Jones Jr. could be, unless they kind of, like you said, put him as the wide receiver 1 in that offense. But I think his team will put up solid points every single week, and it'll be a team where I think in a matchup you're going to have to hope that 1 or 2 of your players kind of step up more than usual in order to beat Uncle Mark.
Yeah, I feel like he has definitely a top tier team this year. So moving along to Uncle Jeremy's team. Let me click on his team real quick. He's got a couple PPR stars. Christian McCaffrey and Jarvis Landry are very ball dominant players, get a lot of touches in a game. And then he also has a tight end, Travis Kelce, who could be top at that position. He's always 1-2 with Rob Gronkowski, depending on how many games Gronk ends up playing this year. He could be the top tight end this year. And then I think a sleeper on his team is Sterling Shepard. I feel like he has a big year from Odell. I mean, the emphasis is going to be on Odell and Barkley, maybe Ingram a little bit. I think Sterling Shepard has a little sneaky big year this year. And then I ranked his team as a tier 2 team. If he takes a better round 1 pick instead of Aaron Rodgers, I feel like that his team would be a tier 1 team, and that he would probably be number 1 in the preseason power rankings.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people made fun during the draft, laughed at his team, but the more I look at it, the more I do like a lot of things about it. Like you said, Christian McCaffrey, the guy's only going to get more production this year, and everybody already knows what he can do in the passing game. Derrick Henry is looking like a guy that can get 20 to 25, maybe even 30 carries in a game based on his size and depending on what they do with that offense. Like you said, Sterling Shepard will definitely benefit from more help around him. Jarvis Landry will be in a situation where I think they'll play a lot of spread offense, a lot of checkdowns, a lot of short throws, keep pressure off of Tyrod Taylor or Baker Mayfield, who's ever in there. And then obviously Travis Kelce is a star, so he does have a lot of talent, especially a lot of PPR talent on his team.
All right, now's the time for the big debate of the podcast, Uncle Denny's team.
Yeah, Uncle Denny's team. So let let me tell them why this was a debate. So, before we filmed this, Ryan and I both decided to put all the teams into 3 tiers, and then based on that, we kind of make our power rankings. Um, I had Uncle Dennis in my first tier, whereas Ryan had him all the way down in his third. Everybody else that we pretty much agreed or came close to agreeing, but Uncle Dennis was the biggest separation by far, and I want to hear Ryan's reason why he was a tier
You want
3
me to go
team.
first?
Yeah, I'd like to hear why he's a tier 3 team to you.
I was gonna let you go first, but I'll go first on why I think that Uncle Denny is in the bottom tier this year in Polock's fantasy league. So there's going to be some positives, but there's also going to be some negatives. So the first thing I want to talk about is Saquon Barkley being the 10th pick in the draft. I think it was a great pick for him. It was high workload. He can catch the ball in the backfield with the best of them. But the one thing I wanted to note was that he is a rookie. He's got to catch up to the speed of the NFL game. And there's a spotlight on top of him. I mean, fantasy football, people are picking him 5th. Some are taking him 3rd. Average draft position 6th. So it's not like he's sneaking into the NFL. He's going to sneak by like Alvin Kamara. Defenses know about him, and he's going to be a vocal point in the Giants' offense. The next thing I want to talk about is that I'm not a fan of Kenyon Drake. Like I said, he's never been a workhorse. He has a lot of talent. Don't get me wrong, he could be a first-round talent if he had the workload, but coaches just don't give him that. And he's getting Keelan Balaj is looking to maybe take over his job. I don't know. There's a lot of question marks there. And then the big topic of discussion is going to be Julio Jones. And I might be on the outside looking in here, but I am not sold on Julio Jones being a top 7 wide receiver in the NFL.
Wow.
I don't believe he has not finished top 10 in fantasy, and he always has those games where he'll go for 220 yards, maybe 2 touchdowns, and single-handedly win you a fantasy game. Don't get me wrong, he will single-handedly win you maybe 4 or 3 games this season, but he's just not consistent enough for me. He'll put up 220 yards receiving, and then the next game he'll go 20 yards for 2 catches. I don't think he's consistent enough to be a top 5 wide receiver. Yes, he goes over a lot of amount of yards each season, but that's because he has those big games where he goes for 200 receiving yards, 150. But those are 4 out of 13 games where he does that. And then last thing I want to touch on was his Jimmy Graham pick. Aaron Rodgers. Well, this was a fact that I dug up. Was that Aaron Rodgers has only thrown 17 touchdowns in his career to tight ends. So don't get me wrong, he hasn't had a talent like Jimmy Graham, but I thought that fact was significant because Jimmy Graham has been bouncing around. He's trying to find his identity like he had with the Saints. He's been with 3 teams in the past 6 years or so, and I'm just not too high on him. But the things I do love about Uncle Denny's team is that he's got Tom Brady, who's going to finish 1-2 as quarterback. I love Juju Smith-Schuster with Steelers and all their weapons. Just being a part of that offense makes you a fantasy factor. Doug Baldwin, I believe, is an X factor. I feel like he's boom or bust, like I said earlier in the show. And when his players like boom, I don't know if that makes sense.
I know what you mean.
When his players go off, his team's going to be elite. I just don't know if his team could be consistent enough to be a top team in this league.
Well, it's first off, I want to say it's funny that you brought up the Aaron Rodgers stat about the tight ends because I didn't actually find that stat, but I did talk about how little he likes to throw to tight ends throughout his career. Because like I mentioned that I had Martellus Bennett last year, who is a very, very talented athlete at wide receiver, at tight end, and he was pretty much ignored by Aaron Rodgers. And then I kind of went through and before him, how many wide or tight ends can you really name for Aaron Rodgers? Richard Rodgers, maybe Andrew Corliss, but yeah, he's never been a guy that has thrown to tight ends. But I do think that Jimmy Graham will kind of change that, just because of his athleticism, the fact that he's much more of a wide receiver than a tight end. I think he adds another dimension to that offense. I completely disagree with you on Julio Jones. I think Julio Jones is a superstar. I mean, I think he's a guy that you definitely want on your team. You definitely want him starting every week. I think Calvin Ridley, who this is not biased because he's on my team, but I think that Calvin Ridley will have good production this year, which will only stand to help Julio Jones. Um, Saquon Barkley, I touched on him earlier, so I'm not really going to go into that too much again. But the player that you didn't mention that I did really, really like, and I did talk about earlier, was Allen Hurns on the Cowboys. And the fact that he was able to get him with the last pick in the draft, he's going to be the wide receiver one on the Cowboys. And I know that's not doesn't mean crazy production, because obviously the focus is going to be on Ezekiel Elliott and the running game. And Dak Prescott, in my eyes, just isn't that good. But when you're a number one receiver, you're a number one receiver. And I think he's going to get a lot more production out of him from the 15th round than a lot of people are going to get out of guys they took from maybe the 10th to the 13th or 14th.
And the one error I want to go back on is that the one error that I made was that Julio Jones hasn't finished top 5 the past 10 years. He finished receiver ranked 7 last year, and he was the 3rd receiver picked off the board this year. Let me just see his numbers real quick.
Okay.
So these are his numbers from week 6 to 13. 13 points, 24, 10, 17, 11, 12, 52, 4. So he's not giving you 20 fantasy points every week like Antonio Brown, but he's giving you that 52, which makes his season totals look better than his actual consistency throughout the season. But we're just going to be different on this.
Yeah.
And it's just my opinion.
Yeah, because I do think having a guy like that is what you want in the playoffs, when some other guys on your team may put up bad games or not play to their potential. You have Julio Jones, who's more than capable of putting up a 30-plus point game to save your team, save your season. And so that's why I'm pretty high on Julio Jones.
All right, so we'll move past to your team.
Okay, let's talk about it.
Hold on. Yeah. Okay. Mom's over here saying it's dinner time. We're rounding up here. Oh yeah, your team. Okay. So you got Kamara, you got Freeman. They're reliable running backs. But I think that your X factor is going to be your wide receiver corps as a whole. I feel like you got to look for a lot of consistency with them. So Cooks, Robinson, they have to prove that they can be consistent week in and week out. I feel like if you get through the first 4 weeks of the season, maybe 2-2, 3-1 instead of 0-4, that could help you dramatically for the rankings and standings. And I also like Kerryon Johnson pick. I have you as a tier 2 team.
Yep, I also have myself as a tier 2 team. Like, I agree with you completely. My receivers aren't anything special. They're nothing that anybody's going to be really scared about. Diggs is a solid guy. I think he's going to get numbers every week. And then I'm hoping for a lot more production out of Cooks this year than I got last year from him, with a change of scenery and everything. And then Allen Robinson, I think, is a guy that's really talented, and I was happy to get him in the 4th round. But yeah, I agree with you that the first 4 weeks are going to tell a lot about the rest of my season. But I definitely don't see myself as one of the most dominant teams. So yeah, I agreed with you and put myself in the 2nd tier.
All right, so then we'll move on to Connor's team. I have him having Zeke. He has Zeke and Kareem Hunt. Is that correct? Right? He got Zeke. I said debatably he got the top running back combo in the league. He's got Kyle's got the best receiver combo in the league, and I think that Connor with Zeke and Kareem Hunt might be the best running back duo in the league. But that's debatable. I feel like he reached on Josh Gordon. I love Tyreek Hill. I like Evan Ingram. I just don't like where he was drafted. And I'm not so high on Golden Tate this year. And that pretty much sums up my summary for his team.
I like Deshaun Watson. I don't think he'll set the league on fire like he did last year, but I think he'll be solid. Kareem Hunt's a guy I'm not crazy about. From I believe it was weeks 4 through 14 last year, he didn't score a rushing touchdown. So he's a guy who's final point rank really was helped out because of his 2 or 3 monster weeks to start the season, and then he had maybe 1 or 2 more super good weeks right at the end. But from weeks 4 through 14, that heart of the schedule, Kareem Hunt, what barely put up. I don't think he ever really put up more than 19 or 18. He was a lot of tens, a lot of sixes, and so that kind of scares me about him going forward, especially on a team with so many weapons.
All right, so we'll move to little Dennis's team, the cheater.
Yeah, a lot of controversy, a lot of controversy about this team.
So, I'll talk about his start. He's got Le'Veon Bell, who's a fantasy superstar.
Yeah.
Rob Gronkowski, a fantasy superstar. AJ Green, a superstar. But the side note I have on AJ Green is that he relies on big plays like Julio Jones. He's not PPR dependent, and a lot of his points come from deep passes, which, don't get me wrong, I'm not complaining about, but a lot of his points come from deep touchdown passes and catches. I said his roster is very top heavy. T.Y. Hilton, and then he has 3 question marks that are maybe concerns or maybe some gold in the ditch. So he's got T.Y. Hilton, I think, as a question mark. Royce Freeman is a question mark, and Will Fuller, I think, is a question mark. Royce Freeman is the number 2 running back. I think he takes over the starting job, but I think it takes some time. I just don't think Devontae Booker is a very good running back. I think Royce Freeman is by far the most talented running back on the Broncos roster, but I feel like it just takes time for him to get that role and the coach's trust. T.Y. Hilton gets Andrew Luck back. It's just that I'm not so sold on him bouncing back so fast from last year. I know Andrew Luck's back, but he could very well be a top 10, top 5 receiver, but he could very well be bottom 50.
Yeah, my problem with Dennis's team is that there's no depth at running back. So, like you said, Freeman is such a big question mark, and I did talk a lot about Freeman earlier, how big of a question mark he is, especially with almost zero passing game, or you don't know what you're going to get out of a passing game with Paxton Lynch at quarterback. So, if Freeman isn't at least a good running back, Dennis could be in a lot of trouble. Chris Thompson is going to be a backup running back, probably to Adrian Peterson with the way he's running right now, and Chris Thompson's injured, he's banged up.
And they're always trying to reduce his workload.
Exactly.
And use him in spurts.
And then Peyton Barber's the only other running back he has on his roster, so he might have to play Royce Freeman every single week, and which could really hurt him if Freeman isn't the player that Dennis thinks he's going to be. I think Dennis would have really benefited by taking a 4th running back a little bit sooner than Peyton Barber over, say, Nelson Aguilar or Cameron Meredith.
Yeah, so I feel like even though we talk about the question marks, I still believe that if his question marks deliver in some kind of way, I feel like his team could still be dangerous.
Yeah, I'm not a crazy about AJ Green either. I used to like him a lot, but the past couple seasons, I really think he's very overrated. I think guys like Devontae Adams, I think Stephon Diggs should be rated higher. I think Adam Thielen honestly should be rated higher. Mike Evans, AJ Green, the Bengals just don't score points really, and like you said, AJ Green's really boom or bust with touchdown. It's kind of like touchdown or bust or big play. He's not the guy he used to be, where he would catch 9, 10 passes every other week. So I think
he had 5 games last year under 10 fantasy points.
Yeah, that's not really what you want out of your 2nd round pick, and your top receiver, especially with so many question marks around him.
All right, so I guess we'll talk about my team. I tried to be a little humble here.
Well, I had you in my top tier as well, so.
So my running backs are solid with David Johnson and Melvin Gordon. I wanted to get them. I wanted to go running back because I knew how lack of depth at running back this year.
Yeah.
But with Melvin Gordon, he doesn't really rush for 100 yards very often, and he's not really much of a pass catcher, but he does score a lot of touchdowns. So we'll see how that works out. For my wide receiver core. I think I have a deep wide receiving core, but I really don't have any really proven stars except maybe the old Larry Fitz. I know Devontae Adams is looking to be number 1 for Aaron Rodgers, but he hasn't really proven himself to be number 1 wide receiver, and he gets hurt sometimes. Pretty often.
Mm-hmm.
And then Adam Thielen, he's a number 2. Some say that he's a number 2 receiver on the Vikings with Stephon Diggs being there.
Mm-hmm.
And then for my quarterback is kind of a big question mark. I have Jared Goff, who in some rankings is ranked outside the top 10 as a fantasy quarterback. But then I feel like one of my sleeper picks could be Trey Burton at tight end. I don't know if he's a sleeper anymore because a lot of people are talking about him. But I feel like he will take advantage of the opportunity and have a decent tight end season.
Yeah, obviously your running backs speak for themselves. Not going to get into that. Thielen's a guy. I think he still flies under the radar a lot. I think he's a lot more talented. He gets a lot more yards than people like to acknowledge sometimes. And then Adams is only going to step up in production really. And then you do have some good receivers on your bench. Although you'll have to get rid of 2 players to get your defense and your kicker.
Yeah, I'm already dropping. I'm dropping my 2 rookies, Anthony Miller and DJ Moore.
And then Jared Goff, you say he's a question mark. I do like him a lot. I think the Rams are a team that's going to score a lot of points, which is the reason I took Cooks again, even after kind of a down season last year. I think they're just going to be running all over teams with Gurley, and I think that's going to make room for a really, really solid air attack, and I think Goff will be really good. So that's why I had your team as a top-tier team.
All right. So we'll jump on the Kyle's team.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, he's got Hopkins and Odell, top 2 receiving core in the league. But I feel like they're going to have to do a lot of heavy lifting if he wants to win some games this year. He's very weak at running back with McKinnon and I think Joe Mixon, who has yet to prove himself as a workhorse in this league. He's got Jordan Reed, a tight end, who doesn't play a lot of games.
Yeah, he gets hurt a lot.
Probably played maybe 5 to 4 games last year. He's got a lot of talent, but he also has a lot of injury concerns. The one pick that I loved by him was Isaiah Crowell. I think he's going to be a sleeper this year. He's a good running back. He's on the Jets. He's going to get an opportunity to score some points. And overall, I just don't think his team is well-rounded or deep enough to win more than 5 games this year, even though he's got Hopkins and Odell as a 2-man dragon.
Well, what's interesting is I think Kyle didn't even realize how good of a pick Crowell was because he wrote that he still plays for Cleveland. So he thought Crowell was going up against 3 other running backs when he's going to be in a situation where he's the featured back, which only stands to help. And I did earlier. I raved about his receivers and how much depth he has there between obviously the 2 stars in Hopkins and Odell. I don't think Demaryius Thomas is that good, really. I haven't liked him.
Me neither.
But Alshon Jeffrey and Michael Crabtree definitely help him out. 2 number 1 receivers on their respective teams. I think they'll give him solid depth at receiver. All right, you want
the preseason power rankings?
Okay, number 10 in to start the preseason rankings for Poppop's Polock's Fantasy Football League is Kyle. Kyle's team ranks number 10 for the reasons we talked about before. Great receivers, lack of depth other than that, beyond that position. Coming in at number 9, we have Connor. Connor, basically the opposite of Kyle. Great running backs, not much else. We just decided his running backs were better than Kyle's receivers. At number 7, pretty surprising, we have Poppop. I think a lot of people thought Poppop would start the season last or at least 9th, but Poppop showed some solid draft improvement this year. I think Poppop is starting to make the moves to put it together, and I'm hoping for a solid season out of him. Number 7, we have me. I said it from the beginning. I kind of viewed myself as a middle team, and going through our power rankings, our teams in the middle were all separated by small little differences. Number 6, we have Dennis. Not really going to say much there. We've said everything pretty much. Just slight differences make him better right now. Uncle Dennis comes in at number 5. Ryan didn't like his team too much. I liked his team a lot. We compromised, put him in the middle. Number 4, Gavin and Uncle Mark. Really solid team. They have some stars, and they're really not weak at any position. Number 3, a lot of surprise here. Uncle Jeremy. A lot of people make fun of his drafting strategy. We've made fun of it a good amount. But at the end of the day, his team is solid. There's no way around that. And he can be really dangerous this season. A lot of PPR depth on that team. The number 2 team in our rankings is my dad. He made some great picks. Obviously had Antonio Brown fall into his lap at the end of the first round, which was great, and he drafted solidly from there with the exception of maybe 1 or 2 other players. And that leaves the number 1 team in the preseason rankings, which would be Ryan. Great draft from Ryan. A lot of star power in the starting lineup and solid depth on the bench.
It's a lot of pressure, man. I don't know if I like this.
It's a lot of pressure.
I don't like this at all.
It's a lot of pressure, but you have the team to handle it.
We'll see what happens. It's going to be a great year for this Polock's fantasy football year. I think the league's going to come up. I'm excited for week 1 matchups. We're going to be doing a lot more podcasts. We're going to do a lot of votes on rivalry weeks, on who you think's going to win. And it should be a fun year.
Thank you for being on the show. Thanks for being on the show. We'll have you back, definitely. So I'm excited to see how this turns out. I'll see you later.
Peace.
Thank you for being on the show. Thanks for being on the show. We'll have you back, definitely. So I'm excited to see how this turns out. I'll see you later.
Peace.
That pretty much wraps it up this week for this week's episode. If you guys have any comments about how I can make it better for the coming weeks or in the future, please let me know. Obviously, with there only being the draft so far, there was only so much we could really talk about, but there will be a lot more stuff coming once the season gets underway and once games start being played and players start moving around. There will be a lot more to talk about. I hope you guys enjoyed watching it. I had a lot of fun making it, and I will see you next week.